What's going on, guys? Scar coming back at you with another Magic the Gathering video. I know it's been a minute since our last Magic video on the channel, but with a little bit of real life stuff getting in the way at the moment, it kind of has taken me to the weekend to kind of start recording some of my Magic videos. So I'll probably be doing a bulk recording of a lot of Magic content so I can distribute it to you guys across the week so we don't have any more dry spells on the channel. The other thing I've also been working on the channel is actually posting in the community thing, I guess, now that I have it unlocked. So I've been posting some certain things in there, which, if you haven't heard, actually, as of today of recording this, they actually did release codes for some special Bob Ross lands to the format. So if you guys want to add those to the MTG Arena, either check in the community tab, or I'll leave maybe a link down below. I'll maybe in the description, I'll just actually put the codes in so you don't have to actually go searching for them if you haven't checked your email. But with that being said, guys, let's dive into the meta. Let's talk about it. You know, I don't know about you guys, but you know, this is one of the longer parts of the in-between sets where we kind of have a very, it's kind of dry. The meta kind of gets, you know, figured out, and I feel like it eventually just starts feeling very stale. I mean, the big part with that is I think it has come down to three different parts of Arena as a whole, not just, I guess, Magic as a whole, not just Arena. And I think it comes down to three major parts, and that is that the reset of rotation didn't really do anything to really reset the overall ladder when it comes to what decks are top tier and whatnot in MTG Arena. Sure, there's maybe a couple outliers there, but reset rotation did not really help anything kind of, you know, recalculate and like refigure out to become top decks. Two, I think Throne of Eldraine plays a big part into why MTG Arena is the way it is, with certain decks being better decks overall. So we'll kind of go into some of those parts there, why I think that is one of the major issues. And three, I think it's just the impact of Magic going in the way of singles, large single sets, instead of kind of doing how they used to do maybe, you know, 5-6 years ago, where they used to do whole blocks of a set. So essentially they would come out with, like, in September, let's just say they come out with like the Zendikar Rising starter, like the first set, which would be a very large set, and then they'd have over the course of the year, or the next, you know, two sets would be a middle set and a last set, which would kind of just expand on those mechanics and things like that. So the set would develop as time went on. But I mean, part of me thinks it's maybe just because of these larger sets. With that being said, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely lets me know that you guys are interested in this kind of content. Also, if you're new here, you want to see when I post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. It will also let you notify yourself when I do post new videos. With that being said, guys, let's dive into the video. So my first point in this talk is that nothing really in rotation really reset the meta. I don't know if it was also because back in August they introduced like post rotation standard meta, like ladder that you can play. And I don't know if it's just because I played a lot of like the post rotation decks, it just kind of felt like nothing really reset as a whole. And I don't really think anything really came out of Zendikar that really, you know, gave some life into the overall meta that was forming in there. I'm sure, you know, we got the rogue deck, which got much improved with the release of Zendikar, just because of all the rogues. The party mechanic, I think, fell flat. I don't really think you really see any competitive party decks really utilizing anything from the party. Same thing with Kicker. Sure, Kicker was a great thing. It was good for a time, but in the current meta landscape, playing Kickers, playing more expensive spells of just spells, but maybe get an additional draw or various things like that, I just don't really fit in the current way how the meta is so aggressive. And three, Omnath was just way too powerful with the cards we had available at the time of its release. Sure, there has been bans, but with Omnath releasing and him just being so powerful with all the mana ramp and all the, you know, abilities to trigger all those landfalls, I think he was just, you know, wrong place, wrong time. If there were certain cards not in the format, I think maybe he would have been able to stick around, but, you know, him getting banned kind of like, you know, flattened the overall effect Zendikar had on the meta as a whole. Now, sure, there's a couple positives come out of this. The pathway lands are pretty interesting. I think some of the modal style effects are pretty cool to be able to play a land one way or the other, which definitely helps benefit, you know, allowing you to play a little bit more utility in your deck as well as playing lands. And three, I think, you know, it shows that Magic's kind of, you know, going in the direction of maybe not having as powerful of a set come out, where there's not really, you know, really too many standout cards. And I think that's a good thing, just because I think, you know, we can see over the past year that there was some cards that maybe just been too powerful, and that actually brings me into my second topic, which is actually that Throne of Eldraine. I think as a set as a whole, and I think we can tell based on what I'm going to go over my next two parts, I think is overall way too powerful, and I think that has an effect overall on the meta. I mean, if you look at all the cards that are currently in the meta, I mean, there's some key cards that really stick out in various decks that are actually in the top of the meta as a whole. I mean, sure, right when rotation happened, I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without actually seeing a venture deck, you know, any sort of style of venture deck, either with Simic or Teamer. Combine that with Omnath, I mean, that deck, when there was the Omnath Adventures deck, oh my god, I mean, that deck was the deck that pretty much showed up to that first major tournament, and I mean, that the following Monday they banned a few cards from that. But then you actually got to look at the history of a Throne of Eldraine, just look at all the bans they actually did. I mean, look at the list here. This is actually a deck that I kind of, or deck, these are cards from Throne of Eldraine that to me stick out very well. And if you actually look in the first column, all those faded out cards are cards that came out of Throne of Eldraine, and these are cards that actually have been banned since the release. I mean, sure, two of them were immediately banned, which just shows you the overall, I guess, you know, the overall play that they tried to test with these cards. I mean, Oko was immediately banned pretty much since release, and then on top of that, Once Upon a Time was also banned. These are just two cards that just came out of the gates broken. And then over the course of time, we also got, you know, we got Fire's Invention was broken for a while. We had Cauldron Familiar, and then more recently with the Omnath ban, we got Escape from the Wild and actually Lucky Clover, which just kind of like, you know, fizzled out the adventure style deck. And on top of that, the power of the cards in the various colors that you still see in the current meta as a whole, I think just overall makes just things stand out as a whole. I mean, the first column for red that you can see is literally most of the mono red aggro deck, and it just shows you the power of these cards. I mean, the first three cards are just a perfect curve of red cards to play in a mono red deck, and on top of that, add that Torbrand and Embercleave. I mean, that is essentially the mono red deck, maybe minus a few of the newer commons and uncommons from it and some lands, but essentially you could play those cards and have a good chance of winning just because of how aggressive it is. Next card here is, sure, the Fey of Wishes maybe isn't as important as it was, but I mean, for a good while, especially with the Adventures deck, I mean, Fey of Wishes allowing you to search your sideboard for a particular card in a certain situation is still very good. And I mean, sure, Teamer Adventures is still lurking around there. I mean, it's not as impactful without Lucky Clover, but the ability to still search your sideboard for a particular card. Also, Brazen Borrower is fairly good depending on what style rogue you play, even the Teamer matchup. I mean, with the Lucky Clover, Brazen Borrower was the most annoying card for a while just because it bounced particular non-land permanents back to your opponent's hand, which pretty much stalled your opponent from really doing anything. And the third column is, you know, the green cards that you kind of see in most mono green decks, as well as Gruul aggro. The Love Struck Beast is just such an impactful card because, you know, sure, it's a these two spell cards I think overall just had a very large effect on the meta as a whole. And also, if you look at this list and there's cards that are missing, I kind of just did some of them. I can't go over any of them, all of them, but these are just some cards, like I said, that just really stand out. The Great Henge is a very strong, powerful card once you get out on the battlefield. Combine that with a Love Struck Beast is just very, very efficient. Questing Beast is also very good. I mean, back when we had a lot more planeswalkers in the format, Questing Beast was a beast in literally trying to take out planeswalkers. I think all the castle lands in their own right are just very powerful lands for what they are, and I mean, sure, they're like check lands. Essentially, you have to have the particular, you know, color on the battlefield in order to actually play them untapped. But I mean, for the ability that you're going to get out of them, the Castle Garenbrig, the Embereth, the Locthwains, the Vantress, and the Ardenvale, you know, each have their own effect depending on the deck you're playing. I would say the Embereth is probably the strongest, followed by the Locthwain, and then depending on where you fall, I would say Garenbrig, maybe followed by Vantress, and Ardenvale would probably be tied, just because, you know, those are very, you know, very particular colored decks. The Ardenvale is probably more an aggro deck, and the Vantress is probably more in that, you know, very control-y style deck. And then the Witch's Oven, I mean, for the longest time in the prior meta proposed pre-rotation was the lifeblood of those Rakdos decks, you know, sacrificing things, getting food tokens, getting cats back from the graveyard to trigger, you know, minus in life, gain in life, and, you know, things like that. I mean, and I think a little bit now, I think, you know, some of the decks are finding out that food tokens are actually very strong, because I mean, you play this and then play, you know, the wolf, or play, you know, the Troll King and stuff like that, and being able to create food tokens just to gain life is pretty efficient in the way the current aggressive meta is. And on top of that, I think Drown in the Loch and Doom Foretold are definitely also some cards that stand out in the multicolored space. just on the fact that Drown in the Loch has just gotten stronger with the introduction of rogues, just because it falls in that perfect Dimir mana style, and it just gets stronger and stronger the more cards you mill into your opponent's graveyard. And just Doom Foretold, I think, has become definitely a very strong deck. Combine that with Yori and Sky Noodle. Doom Foretold is just one of those cards that if you don't have a very aggressive start against this style deck, you're in for it. I mean, sure, I mean, they'll eventually start making you sacrifice things, and on top of it, they're gonna dance to the Mancy probably by turn like 8 or so, if you even last that long, or don't get annoyed by how Doom Foretold is, how effective it is. But with that being said, I mean, these are just some crazy cards that have come out of the meta. I would say I am forgetting cards, and I think that the cards I'm even forgetting, like Into the Story, is another one that comes off the top of my head that I didn't actually have here on the list. Combine that with the Dimir Rogue style matchup is just as strong. I would say there's a lot of cards out of this that are in the top meta decks that, if you really think about it and kind of look at the top meta decks, it just shows you the power of these cards and how good they are. And it's just one of those things. I just think that this is like peak Magic power, you know, and every set that has followed has kind of gotten a little bit weaker, and I think that's why these cards still stand out in the way it is. Typically, you would assume that since this set has come out, there's been now 4 sets that have come out, and these cards are still just as potent, if not better. That being said, I think this is the impact of how larger sets could have. And instead of, you know, having this as a block, they did this as, you know, just one single large set, and then if another large set falls flat, you know, the set that was stronger than it still stays prominent. And that moves me on to my third and last topic, and that's actually the impact of just large single sets. And this is like what I said. Back in 2018, Magic actually moved from doing 2-set blocks into, you know, the single large sets, and prior to that, they did initial 3-card sets for a single block. So if Throne of Eldraine was a, you know, back in like I think 2012, 2013, it would have been a 3-card set, which would have been, you know, Throne of Eldraine would have been the main first set, and the 2 following sets that year, or that would follow, would just been more expansions to improve upon the current mechanics that are in that set. And sure, maybe some things would have been added in. And I think, you know, each has their plus and minus. I think, you know, the plus of having large single sets is that you can have one set that really explodes, and then you can have, you know, the minus is that you can have a set that just fizzles out and does nothing. And then 2, on top of it, you know, things can be kind of worked upon as you kind of go further and dig a little deeper into a particular set, rather than just kind of having things have a one and done kind of feel. And I feel like you could kind of expand cards and expand mechanics. I think with them only doing these single large sets, I feel like there's some things that could have probably used some additional cards to kind of make better. I think companions, for example, kind of were one of those things that seemed really strong and very powerful at the beginning. Then they added the rule change after that happened, and I think, you know, other than maybe 2 companions, we don't really see anyone else really play the other ones. I mean, sure, every now and then for memes or something like that, you play, like, you know, one of the other companions, but the other companions really aren't as effective. I mean, you could say Karuga was a very impactful card when a card like Fire Intervention was a thing, but, you know, in current standard meta, I mean, it's Luris and it's Yorion are the 2 ones you really prominently see. And I think that's something that also could be interesting. I mean, like the party mechanic, back when Zendikar first came out, I think it was Allies, and the party mechanic seems something similar to like Allies, and I think it just needs more cards that kind of have party effects to overall make that much stronger of a deck, just because, you know, them adding the rogues that kind of just benefited a rogue deck that was kind of already somewhat established, and then it just improved upon it that much more. Just overall seemed it much better. Party didn't really get the same effect, just because I don't think there's the core cards that you need in a party deck really that are as effective in various levels to make that as competitive. And I think also Mutate probably could use a little bit more cards and more love to actually kind of flesh that out, so like you don't have to play, like, you know, the Simic Mutates or, you know, Sultai Mutate. Like, I think if you would have found more Mutate cards in, like, you know, white, red, I would say maybe even black a little bit more, I feel like you could probably have seen more diverse Mutate style decks. But I think that's one of those mechanics, and I honestly think there's some cards that, you know, we're not going to see more of to kind of like help benefit other style decks. Like, we're not going to see triumphs of the other types that weren't created, so unfortunately, if you play one of the other colors that aren't the main 5 triumphs that are currently in the format, you're unfortunately not going to see a triumph that matches more of the I forget how to like word it, but it's like there's other color schemes that aren't the 5 that are on the triumphs that you could probably do. I think it's the other 5. I think there's a total of 10. I can't remember 100%, and I think they're like the hate colors essentially, or hate triumphs almost essentially. We were not going to see reverse ones of that. On top of that, you know, you have cards like the Pathways. I don't know if we're going to see in the next set. I remember hearing someone say something about the Pathways will be in the next set, but yet again, Pathways are limited to Zendikar Horizon as of right now, and until we start seeing the spoiler season, we're not really going to know there. And I think, like I said, if they would have, you know, go back to like Throne of Eldraine, if they would have done a whole block of Throne of Eldraine, we would have had, you know, this could have gone two different ways. We would have had this full impact of, you know, all these Throne of Eldraine cards that would have been just super duper strong, and then to have, you know, the Zendikar block come out, it maybe would have fallen flat. But I don't know, it's one of those things. I mean, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about like what thing sticks out to you being maybe as to why maybe the meta feels a little bit weird at the moment. Like I said, if Throne of Eldraine is something, let me know that you agree with me down in the comments below. If it's something else, let me know down below. If it's just me, you know, maybe getting a little burned out with playing a lot of Magic, and, you know, just some of the decks that just feel overplayed or whatnot, heck, let me know there too. But guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. It definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I will catch you in the next video.